Hey, I'm Matt Manning. Thanks so much for joining me for today's devotional thought. We're at the end of the week this week, and we're on day 10, and we're talking about the devotional is called Based on a True Story. We're going to jump to the Old Testament to a story of a prophet by the name of Jeremiah. And all that we've come through over these last 2.5 years or so, what Jeremiah's stories, the truths that it holds from thousands of years ago, really can apply to us today. A little bit of the background of Jeremiah's story. Jeremiah was a prophet in the Old Testament. Now, if you know anything about the Old Testament, you know that the nation of Israel, they had kings. Some were good, some were bad. And eventually, God sent prophets to them who told them that they either needed to turn to God, and if they didn't turn to God, that their nation would be torn apart and that they would be taken into captivity. And sure enough, that took place. Some of the people were taken from Jerusalem and from the land of Israel, and they were placed and lived in the capital city as refugees, as transplants, if you will, to live there. A guy by the name of Daniel, if you remember the story of Daniel in the lion's den, he was removed from Jerusalem, and then he was placed in Babylon. But a guy by the name of Jeremiah, he was a prophet who was allowed to stay in Jerusalem. Now, as word got back to him in Jerusalem of what was taking place in Babylon, he found out that the people were living in tents, in temporary housing, if you will. They were kind of waiting for the opportunity for them to return back to their homeland. And what Daniel had prophesied and the other prophets had foretold was that there would be at least a generation of time that the nation of Israel would be in captivity, roughly 70 years. And so Jeremiah hears that the people are just they're not settling down, they're not having families get established, they're not working the land, they're just kind of griping, complaining, looking forward to when they can finally get back to what they would call normality or normalcy. And so Jeremiah sends a letter by one of his assistants, and he says to them that God has plans and hope for them. If you know the verse of scripture, Jeremiah 29:11, that comes out of this story. And as Jeremiah writes to them that God has a hope for them, a future for them, plans for them, he also says very specifically that he has instructions for them of what to do while they're in this waiting period, this waiting time. And so the encouragement is this. He says, even though you're in a different place, you still have the same purpose that God has given to you. Whether you're in Jerusalem or in Babylon, you still have the same purpose. And here's what it comes down to. There's 4 instructions that Jeremiah gives. He says, first of all, build homes. He says, work and to build up a place of structure. Instead of living in tents, build a place that's permanent for you to go ahead and live and feel comfortable in. He says work the field, so work your job, work the ground to go ahead and have fruits and vegetables and have something to provide yourself for sustenance. He says raise your families, get married, have kids, raise up your kids to get married and have grandkids. And he says be fruitful and multiply, if you will. He says don't dwindle away. And then last of all, he says pray for the peace and prosperity of your city, because its welfare determines your welfare. Now, you may not be in the place that you had hoped for, but God's purposes aren't based on the place we're at. His purposes are based on who we are before Him, that we're His children, and He's called us to these purposes. And maybe for you in your life, you can find some encouragement, and as the nation of Israel, as they were grieving, as they were frustrated, as they just kind of couldn't get on with life, maybe for you it's time to say, I'm going to create a life that I can enjoy, that I love, and I'm going to not go ahead and be stuck and waiting for relief to come, but I'm going to go ahead and move on with where I am. So I'm going to build a place. I'm going to build my life. I'm going to build a home. I'm going to work my job. I'm going to love my family. I'm going to go ahead and pray for my community and pray for the peace of the place that I live in, because its welfare determines my welfare. You may not be in charge of the division where you're at work. You may not have the opportunity to go ahead and change your relationships around you and say, you know what, I wish I could trade in for other family members. You may be in a situation that's really tough. But God's call to us is no matter the place, we still have the same purpose. And that's to honor and glorify Him with our lives. So the goal is this: create a place you love. Look forward to the little joys at your workplace. Love your family. And then pray for the peace and pray for the prosperity of the community that you live in. For more encouragement, go ahead and look into Jeremiah chapter 29, verses 11 to 14. Thanks so much for watching.